So, if you have never seen healthy emotional regulation or healthy communication around your actual emotions, how can you begin doing that for your children?
What if the emotional struggle you face today aren't personal flaws, but skills no one ever taught you? Many dads are trying to show up better for their kids than their own fathers did, but no one handed them a playbook. If you grew up without seeing healthy emotional expression, conflict resolution, or vulnerability modeled in your home, you're not alone. The good news is emotional skills can be learned at any stage of life. This episode speaks directly to fathers who want to break generational patterns and become more present, emotionally steady, and connected with their kids. So, you, as always, or even if it's the first time, you're watching Dad Central, a parenting podcast to reduce stress and build confidence in fatherhood. And as always, our show is sponsored by Dove Men+Care. Dove Men+Care believes that care is the best of a man because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. And a few other things we want to make sure. First of all, we'd love to hear from you. We'd like to have you give us some questions. We can answer them during our show. So please feel free to email us at podcast@dadcentral.ca. And whether you're listening or watching us, if you haven't subscribed, why haven't you? If you have, great. But if you haven't, why not? So wherever you're watching or listening to this, please, please, please subscribe and tell other people about it. So today, Drew and myself will be talking about breaking the cycle, learning the emotional skills you were never shown. Drew, what are your opening thoughts on this conversation?
Oh man, Ed, I am not even sure where to start, but my thoughts are well, I can certainly relate to any dad who's wanting to do this. I started with twins, and twin toddlers and a newborn was a pretty challenging time in the house. That's for sure. I was becoming face to face with the fact that wow, uh, we're not really good at our own emotions because it seems these toddlers and their emotions are really triggering some of our emotions as parents. So it's one that I think is a good conversation to have. If you're a dad who's experienced some of these difficulties, uh, the absolutely amazing thing to know is that your skills and your ability to manage through this can absolutely be changed and relatively quickly. So I hope that there's hope for dads who are listening and hearing this and say, "Hey, this is I can relate to that." And of course, excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold today, so my voice may come in and out.
No problem. We've got your back. So before we get right into the conversation, we're going to be covering a number of different topics today. And so just want to give you a preview. We're going to talk about you can't model what you've never seen. We're also going to chat about emotional skills are learnable. Then breaking the generational pattern, and we'll have some takeaways. So Drew, let's start it off in regards to you can't model what you've never seen.
Yeah, well, I think that's a pretty straightforward truth. As a John Maxwell coach, I've read lots of John Maxwell's material. One of the quotes may be attributed to him or not, but he talks about is you can't give what you don't have. And so it's the similar idea, right? So if you have never seen healthy emotional regulation or healthy communication around your actual emotions, or if you've never even seen an understanding of what emotions are, how can you begin doing that for your children? So I think it makes perfect sense, right? And many of us may have grown up with fathers that had very limited emotional expression. The emotions they expressed or that we saw expressed was maybe anger, and maybe the other one was, is this even emotion? Silence. You don't know. Or maybe dad just wasn't around much sometimes. Something would happen and next thing dad's kind of not in the picture, and then he would kind of resurface sometimes. So you know those are maybe some of the examples. I don't know, Ed, what can you share? Like, what did you experience from your dad growing up?
Well, thanks for asking a number of different things. Definitely that I call it the seesaw father. On one end, lots of It was anger, on the other end, quietness. So it was like seesawing back and forth.
Mm.
And it took many years of our relationship together to have a balanced relationship. And I think it's not unusual. I think not only for myself or yourself and other dads, fathers, and male co-givers to have that experience in their lives. And even more, I like this episode even more, just putting it out there, and would love to get some feedback from our listeners. What type of father did you have? If you had a father in your home or male caregiver, did you have that balanced emotional relationship, or was it, as Drew and myself have mentioned, those two prevalent things, the anger or the silence? And most of the fathers I communicate with, sorry, is that silence and anger, and it's really challenging because that's all they know, so it can be very challenging to step into the world of fatherhood with that example.
Yeah. And especially if your goal is to change it.
Yeah.
If you haven't, let's say, done some of the work around recognizing your own emotions, and then learning how to communicate those emotions in healthy ways to those around you, it can be quite challenging as well because you see yourself repeating that pattern, right? And that was what I saw early on. And even still, it comes up for me, even though I've been working at this for quite a while. So the point here is not to, belittle or, make it, what am I trying to say? We're not trying to, say our dads were terrible. What we're trying to say is that you can't um, do something if you've never really been shown how. And so that means that you have probably the capacity to do it. So you're not locked in. So that's what we want to talk through in terms of moving forward is how do you learn this skill? And then how do you become more effective at using the skill to improve the relationships as well as improve your capacity to communicate these things?
Yeah. Just adding on to what Drew is saying, lack of modeling doesn't equal lack of capacity. So just because you weren't exposed to, for lack of a better term, positive fatherhood, doesn't mean you don't have the opportunity and the ability and the capacity to, as I like to say, make a U-turn. And I put this call to action out there to people who are watching or listening. What did your dad model when it came to handling stress, sadness, or conflict? And the second part of that question is, are you replicating that? Are you emulating what you have learned? So just a thought on that point there. Drew, do you want to add anything else before we move forward?
Just a slight reframe of your U-turn analogy, if you're okay with that. Yes, you can completely make a U-turn, but even a 1 degree difference repeated over time can lead to being miles in a location that's miles away from where what you were going before. So, you know, yes to the U-turn, but even that 1 degree, and hopefully if it today can give you a 1 degree, then create that 1 degree difference and just keep working at it.
Good stuff. Let's talk about emotional skills are learnable. What are your thoughts?
Well, if it's a skill, it's learnable, right? Anybody can learn a skill. Now, some of us may have more natural aptitude or capacity, but every skill is learnable. So that's the basic truth. And I think if we're talking for dads around this idea of emotional skills, I'm going to share just a brief story. So to that time, I said it was pretty stressful. Twin 2.5-year-olds and a newborn son, pretty challenging time. And this is where I came upon Dr. Travis Bradbury. So he's one of the authors of Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And so I started reading his book, and quickly I became aware of, man, I feel like I'm pretty emotionally unaware. There's a simple chart in the opening of the book that shows the 5 core emotions. Now, not to go into a kid's reference, but the Inside Out movie kind of breaks those down as well. Those are the 5 core emotions. But within each emotion, there's varying degrees of intensity. And so therefore there's various words that we use to describe, but they're still from 5 core emotions. And so, it seems silly now, but it was almost like eye opening to me. Oh yeah, okay, there's these five emotions, and so, but also that varying degrees gave me the capacity to recognize, well, what intensity of this emotion might I be feeling now, and so that was the starting point of beginning to recognize, okay, well, what word can I use to describe, the emotion, one of those five, and the intensity level. And so that chart was quite helpful, as well as just continuing on reading the book, as well as the value of emotional intelligence to supporting your success everywhere in life, let alone at home in your family, which hopefully, if you're listening to the show, it's probably one of the most important places for you. So, with my little story, we'll break this down into three simple skills. Number one, and this is where the chart helped me, was naming your emotion, right? Some of us were, how are you feeling? Good. Good's not an emotion, you know? Um, yeah, how you feeling? Fine. Sorry, fine's not an emotion, right? Or I'm angry or I'm frustrated. Okay, you're getting there. But those might be the limited repertoire we have. We have to begin to develop our repertoire, and that's where understanding the five core emotions and then the level of intensity and what name could describe them is going to be really helpful. So that's a skill. You can learn that very easily, right? And then you want to be able to begin doing it, but that takes time. You have to actually introspect, think about it. What are you feeling? Ed, you want to talk about the second one, and then I'll come back in on the third one?
Sure. Regulating before reacting. Pause, breathe, and rest. And I also want to add to that the pause, breathe, and rest. And periodically, I mention this acronym HALT, HALT. And the acronym stands never make a decision when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. So, just a suggestion that works a lot for me. Like, I'm not 100% perfect, but when I heard that, that sort of has resonated with me for years and years. And I share that a lot with fathers, is that instead of just go, pause, breathe, reset. So you get in the right, for lack of it, the right fatherhood state. I'll use that terminology. So get yourself in the right state, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, etc., before you react. I hand it back to you.
Yeah. If I can add in there, and then I'll go on to it, is recognizing that, these intense emotions that we might feel will innately want us to act, right? It's like the fight, flight, or freeze reaction. And it's like, you got to do something. And that is, you have to come up with this phrase, from Dr. Laura Markham, where I learned this, is like, it's not an emergency. My body, my nervous system is reacting like it's emergency, but it's not. And I have to take control consciously and say, it's not an emergency. Don't worry. Because I'm an action taker. That's just the way I am. A problem, a situation, something happens. I'm like, okay, I'm going to take action. And so I have to override my natural inclination to sort of take action, because often that action is born out of not fully aware of what I'm actually feeling. And it's more to like, solve the issue rather as opposed to like understand the issue. And so, anyways, I just want to add that in there. That's an important recognition that I had. And hopefully that helps anyone who's listening to it now around this idea of regulating is really, really helpful. And then finally, look, we're all going to make mistakes. The third skill is repairing after a rupture or breakdown. And this is, I would say, if you ask Dr. Becky, this is the most important, I'd say, skill you can learn, because it helps bring things back. Apologizing, acknowledging, being humble or vulnerable enough to acknowledge I made a mistake. It helps the process of beginning to reconnect and repair this idea of the broken safety, we'll say, or the broken trust that comes when we do have a rupture or when we make a mistake. And this, to me, is so powerful, but so often we don't take this step, whether it's guilt, whether it's shame, which we've talked about in a previous episode, or whether it's pride, or whether it's we just don't feel like we were wrong in the first place and we're not willing to take that step to humble ourselves to say, I'm really sorry. you know this to me is, I think, one of the most powerful pieces you can do, and this is a skill. It's learnable. It takes work, yes. Recognize your emotions, but you can do it. And the more that you do it, even if it's just routine, if you're not fully heart's not into it, it's still going to work. It's still going to offer value. I'm going to stop talking because I'm about to cough.
No problem. You take a little break. Hopefully, you have some water with you. That I'm sure that will help out. And just to close off that section, and this is a recurring theme through our conversations, growth matters more than perfection. Always realize it. That, as Drew mentioned, even that 1% growth is more important than any perfection. Our final segment, breaking the generational pattern. Drew, let's see if you got enough strength to end it off here.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do, but you can hop in there too. Simple points are when you learn these emotional skills, your kids are getting to witness them in real time. And the saying goes, much more is caught than taught. When they see you living these skills out in front of them, they're naturally going to begin to learn them and even begin to start demonstrating them. And that to me is one of the most powerful and encouraging things as a father. When I see my daughter who has done something to hurt one of her siblings, and she willingly goes to them and says, "Look, I'm really sorry. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done that." She's modeling repair, and I feel that's so important. On the flip side, I also find it very challenging if they've made a mistake and they've hurt someone else and they refuse to, even though it's being modeled for them. It's quite challenging. So, you know, it remember that when you do this, you're helping your kids. Back to you.
Yeah, and modeling effort teaches resilience, and also vulnerability brings strength, not weakness. I want to add on to this point here, not only breaking the generational pattern when you're going forward, but if you have your father still in your life and you have a good relationship, I challenge you to sit down and find out about your growing up through his eyes. What was right, what wasn't right. I'm a very big proponent of learning from our elders, and the conversations I have with my dad and other male elders about childhood raising children, it can be very, very valuable. I've had some of the greatest learning experiences sitting down with my dad and some of his friends and hearing old stories when they were growing up, some of the challenges, some of the victories. If you have that opportunity, I encourage you really to do it. Guess we want to break that generational pattern going forward, but if you can learn from the past and take what was good and what wasn't good, I just encourage that's a great way to move forward. And I also want to just end off saying, what's one emotional skill you want your child to learn from watching you? So as we wrap up today, we covered 3 areas. We covered you can't model what you've never seen. We also talked about emotional skills are learnable. And then finally, breaking the generational pattern. And takeaways today, realize you are not behind, you're learning. And emotional strength is built, not inherited. And then finally, your willingness to grow may be the most important gift you give to your kids. Drew, what is our resource for our family for today?
Well, we've got a resource called this 7 step guide. Oh man, I can't even remember it. It's a 7 step guide to calm, more peaceful parenting. And in it, it talks about some of these skills, both the emotional awareness pieces as well as the repair piece. So I think that's a great resource for our listeners.
Excellent. And I want to end off with some encouragement here. You may not have been shown how, but you can be the one who shows the next generation. I think that's a great way to end it off today. So, as always, want to say thank you for taking your time, your most important thing to listen or watch us. And as always, don't just manage your time, manage your energy, and remember to give yourself grace. We'll see you soon.